My neighbor demanded I stop hosting gatherings on weekends, claiming, "Your guests take up all the street parking and that's inconvenient for me." When I refused, he called noise complaints on me every time I had visitors, even when we were quiet. I installed security cameras and said, "Funny, since I recorded you hosting loud parties and the HOA just received the footage." I live in a quiet suburb just outside of Chicago. The neighborhood is peaceful, with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. I've been here for over a decade, and one of the things I cherish most is hosting weekend gatherings. Every Saturday, friends and family come over for barbecues, game nights, or just to catch up. It's nothing wild, just good company and laughter. A few months ago, a new neighbor moved in next door. Let's call him Greg. At first, he seemed pleasant enough. We exchanged greetings, and he even attended one of my gatherings. But soon, things took a turn. One Monday morning, Greg approached me as I was getting the mail. "Hey," he began, "I wanted to talk to you about your weekend parties." I was taken aback. "Sure, what's up?" "Your guests are taking up all the street parking. It's inconvenient for me and my visitors." I explained that it's public parking and that my guests are careful not to block driveways or fire hydrants. Still, he insisted, "It's a nuisance." I offered to remind my guests to be mindful, but he didn't seem satisfied. The following weekend, I hosted another gathering. As usual, it was a small group, and we kept the noise down. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. It was the police, responding to a noise complaint. They were polite and, after a brief check, left without issue. This became a pattern. Every weekend, without fail, the police would show up, citing noise complaints. Each time, they found no violations. It was clear that Greg was behind these calls. I tried to address the issue directly. I approached Greg and asked if we could find a compromise. He denied making the calls and accused me of being inconsiderate. Frustrated, I decided to take action. I installed security cameras around my property, ensuring they covered the street and my yard. I also invested in a decibel meter to monitor noise levels during gatherings. With this setup, I had concrete evidence that my parties were within acceptable noise levels. Interestingly, the cameras also captured Greg hosting his own loud parties during the week. Music blaring, guests shouting, it was all recorded. Armed with this evidence, I attended the next homeowners association meeting. I presented the footage, highlighting the discrepancies between Greg's complaints and his own behavior. The HOA took note and issued a formal warning to Greg. Since then, the noise complaints have ceased. Greg keeps to himself, and my weekend gatherings continue peacefully. Sometimes, standing up for yourself requires a bit of patience and the right tools. A few quiet weekends passed, and I thought maybe Greg had finally let it go. The police stopped showing up, and the neighborhood felt calm again. But that didn't last long. One evening, a friend of mine, Jess, came over to help set up for a small get-together. She parked in front of Greg's house, still on public street, not blocking anything. 15 minutes later, she came back inside, pale and shaking. Greg had come out of his house, banged on her window, and yelled at her for disrespecting his space. She told me he called her a trash guest and said I was a problem neighbor who didn't belong here. That part hit hard. I walked over to his house immediately and rang the bell. He didn't answer. But I knew he was home. His curtains moved. I stood there, waiting, fists clenched, but he never opened the door. Instead, the next morning, I got a notice from the city taped to my door. Zoning violation. Apparently, Greg had reported that I was running an unlicensed event venue out of my house. That I was charging for parties. Total lie. But now I had to prove I wasn't violating any laws, and that meant paperwork, calls, and even a visit from a city inspector. It was humiliating. The inspector came while I was at work, so I had to reschedule. My neighbors started asking questions. Some of them looked at me differently, like maybe I was doing something shady. I started documenting everything, every visitor, every gathering, every interaction. I saved text messages, took photos, and even printed out the city's own guidelines to show I wasn't in violation. A few days later, I saw Greg talking to two other neighbors across the street. They kept glancing toward my house. I didn't know what he was saying, but whatever it was, it worked. One of them, Marla, who used to wave to me every morning, suddenly turned cold. When I tried to say hi, she looked away. Then it escalated. I woke up one morning to find deep scratches down the side of my car. Someone had keyed it. No note, no witnesses, and of course, my cameras didn't catch it. It happened just outside the frame. I filed a report, but there was nothing the police could do without evidence. I suspected Greg, but I couldn't prove it. And that's what made it worse. I tried to go about my routine like nothing had changed, but the energy around me was different now. My house, once full of laughter, started to feel like a trap. I even considered canceling the next gathering. But then, something happened that flipped the whole situation on its head. One night, just after midnight, I was going through old camera footage, mostly checking audio levels, when I saw something strange. Greg, in front of my house, wearing a hoodie, looking up at the camera. Then, he pulled something out of his pocket. It was a small object, couldn't tell exactly what. But he walked toward my mailbox, stayed there for about 10 seconds, and then walked away. My heart started racing. I ran outside and checked the mailbox. Inside, there was a small envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just my name in shaky handwriting. I took it inside, opened it carefully, and inside was a single piece of paper. Typed. No signature. It read, "Stop, or things will get worse." That was it. Just those words. My hands were shaking. My face felt hot. This wasn't about parking anymore. This wasn't even about noise. This was personal now. Someone was trying to scare me, corner me. Greg, or someone connected to him, had crossed a serious line. I saved the footage, printed the note, and took both straight to the police. This time, they didn't brush it off. They said this could be considered a threat and they'd keep an eye on things. But we all know what that really means. Nothing unless something else happens. So I made a decision. I installed new cameras. Higher resolution, better angles, even one facing my mailbox directly. I bought floodlights with motion sensors. I started backing my car into the driveway so the plates weren't exposed to the street. And then I started digging. If Greg wanted a war, I wasn't going to sit back anymore. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. What I found shocked me. Greg had lived in 3 other neighborhoods in the past 10 years. Each time, he'd moved after some kind of conflict, lawsuits with neighbors, restraining orders, even an arrest for harassment, though the charges were dropped. I printed every document I could find. I made copies. I highlighted the patterns, and I wasn't done. The next HOA meeting was in 2 weeks. And I was going to bring all of it. Every shred of proof. Every threat. Every lie. Every past incident. Because this time, I wouldn't just be defending myself. I was going on offense. A week before the HOA meeting, something really strange happened. I came home from work and found that someone had placed a large, dead potted plant on my porch. Just sitting there, dirt spilling over the sides, like someone ripped it out of their yard and dropped it off. No note, no explanation. I checked the camera footage. The image was fuzzy, just a figure in a hoodie again, walking fast, head down. Could have been Greg, could have been someone else, but it matched the same time and clothing as the person who left that threatening note. I reported it again. The police said they'd add it to the record, but unless I caught the person clearly, their hands were tied. I could feel the fear and anger building in me. It wasn't just my gatherings being targeted anymore. Someone was actively trying to make me feel unsafe at home. That weekend, I hosted a very small get-together. Just 3 close friends. I didn't want to let fear win, but I also didn't want to take chances. We stayed inside mostly, didn't even play music. We just talked. But around 10 30, my friend Ravi went outside to take a call and came back in looking shaken. Your neighbor, he said. He's standing in his window. Just staring. Hasn't moved. We peeked through the curtains. Greg was indeed standing there, barely blinking, just looking straight at my house with the lights off behind him. No shame. No attempt to hide. It was like something out of a horror movie. I kept the footage again. I saved everything. I knew the HOA meeting was going to be huge, but then something changed my entire plan. 3 days before the meeting, I got a letter in the mail. Certified. This one wasn't anonymous. Greg had filed a civil complaint against me. He was suing me for emotional distress and harassment through gatherings, claiming that my parties had caused him insomnia, anxiety, and a hostile living environment. He'd even printed screenshots from my security footage, ones I had posted in our neighborhood online forum to clear my name, and tried to twist it to make me look like the aggressor. I felt sick. He was trying to flip the narrative completely. He was framing me as the problem. I got a lawyer. Thankfully, a friend of mine from college had gone into civil litigation and agreed to help me for cheap. We went over everything: the footage, the noise reports, the letter, the dead plant, even the scratched car. She helped me build a timeline that showed Greg's pattern, how each time he escalated after he didn't get his way. Then she found something I hadn't even considered. The property line. It turns out my side yard, a small strip of grass where my guests sometimes stood to smoke, wasn't actually part of my property. It was part of the HOA common area. And by HOA rules, Greg had no legal say over who stood there, even if it was directly beside his house. That gave me leverage. It proved he'd been harassing me over land that didn't even belong to him. I brought it all to the HOA meeting, along with my lawyer. The room was packed. Greg showed up too, acting calm, polite, even smug. He had a folder of papers and sat in the front like he was ready to give a speech. When my name was called, I didn't hold back. I played the footage of his parties, showing him drinking and blasting music on weeknights. I passed around a copy of the anonymous threat and the dead plant incident. I showed the legal complaint, the twisted screenshots, and then I revealed the biggest twist: the property line maps and HOA bylaws. Greg tried to interrupt, but the board shut him down. For the first time, I saw him rattle. His face went red. He tried to blame editing and misinterpretation, but the damage was done. Then one of the board members, an older guy named Leo, spoke up. "This isn't the first time I've heard of problems like this with you," Leo said. And that's when things really took a turn. Leo revealed he'd gotten an anonymous tip. Someone had sent him a letter detailing Greg's. 2 weeks later, the HOA meeting finally came. I showed up early with a folder full of documents. Police reports, footage stills, the anonymous threat, the city complaint Greg filed, and, most importantly, the records I found from his past. I didn't smile at anyone. I didn't make small talk. I sat down and waited for them to call on new business. When they did, I stood up. I said, "For months, I've been dealing with false reports, harassment, and now threats. I didn't want to believe my neighbor had something personal against me, but I have proof he's tried to do the same thing in other places he lived." I handed out the packets I made. People flipped through them slowly, eyes getting wider with every page. One HOA board member raised her eyebrow when she got to the police report about Greg allegedly trespassing on another neighbor's property in his old neighborhood. I finished with, "I've stayed within all rules. I've been patient. But enough is enough." The room went silent. Greg wasn't at the meeting. He'd said in the community app he was sick. But I knew he'd hear about what happened the next day, maybe even that night. What I didn't expect was what came after. The following morning, someone egged my front door. Not just 1 or 2 eggs, dozens. It dripped down the siding into the screen door. Yolk on my doormat. That wasn't all. My tires were slashed. Not 1. All 4. And in red spray paint across my driveway, "Liar." The police came again. This time, they didn't need much convincing. The note, the video, the sudden escalation. They opened a harassment investigation. The HOA also launched their own review. I stayed quiet, but I didn't stop recording. 2 days later, the neighbor across the street, Marla, rang my doorbell. She looked nervous. I didn't know it was this serious, she said. I thought Greg was just a little upset about the parking, but I saw him the night your car got hit. He was wearing gloves. I asked, will you tell the police? She nodded. That was the final piece. Greg got arrested a week later. Trespassing, vandalism, harassment. Turns out, he wasn't just targeting me. He had slashed another neighbor's tires 2 years back. Same red spray paint trick, but no one could prove it then. This time, we had it all. But here's the part one haven't told anyone until now. The part where I messed up. After all that happened, I started getting calls from the city again. Apparently, someone had complained I was surveilling the neighborhood too much. That my cameras were invading privacy. And yeah, maybe I'd gone a little overboard. I had one camera mounted high enough to see across several yards. A couple neighbors complained. The HOA told me I'd need to take it down or face a fine. I didn't push back. I knew I'd let it get too far. The revenge had consumed me. I'd started off defending myself, but somewhere along the way, I crossed into obsession. I was waking up in the middle of the night to check footage, checking license plates, writing down who came and went on the block. I even told a delivery driver once not to park in front of Greg's old house, even though no one lived there anymore. I had turned into something I hated, a neighborhood watchdog no one asked for. Greg moved out 2 months after his arrest. Sold the house fast and quiet. No goodbye. No apology. But even after he left, the neighborhood never felt the same. I still host gatherings, but not as often. People show up less. Some moved. Some just avoid me now. I can't blame them. I won the war. But the cost was high, not just for Greg. For me too. I keep the footage saved. I don't look at it, but I keep it, just in case.